Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Digital Marketing Podcast. As for every second episode right now, we have Alex with us. Alex, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Rocco. A bit cold. It's winter where I'm at. But besides that, things are groovy. How
Oh,
about
yes.
you, Rocco?
Here it's summer, but it keeps raining, Alex. In Florida, this is like rainy season. In South Africa, it's winter. It's all upside down, but it's all good, man. A busy week. Busy week. A lot of clients writing us with this big Google alert for Google Analytics, that they keep sending even if you created GA4 a long time ago, but it's all good. Today, Alex, just as a reminder to our listeners, we are going to talk about Google and more specifically the broad match keywords. As for every time, guys, this episode is going to be on LinkedIn, YouTube, and on all the major streaming platforms. So if you do not have the time to listen to it live, you can always catch up with us later on. But let's jump right in the topics for today. Alex, the first thing that I wanted to cover was the big push that Google is doing for broad match keywords, and more specifically, a topic that is very dear to me. So Google is asking as a recommendation more and more often, also through their reps, to switch your keywords to broad match, to which I've always been doubtful. So what did I do? I went ahead and created a Google experiment for a few of my clients. I allocated a percent of the budget to broad match. The campaign was doing great. Then the moment I tried to switch the campaign to broad match, the campaign wasn't doing as great anymore. To which I came to the realization that yes, with experiment you can test how things perform, but since you allocate a portion of the budget, at a lower budget, a campaign usually tends to get better CPAs simply because it has less to spend, the customers can be found faster. What is your experience so far with Broadmatch? Like, I know that we have discussed it internally a few times, but where do you stand in regards to that?
I mean, from my side, I think it depends on client and it's a case by case scenario. I'm often when it so depending on what industry you're in, if you, and how many searches you actually do have sort of on a monthly basis on sort of your core terms. But if you're in a very niche type of category, I have a tendency of very much liking broad because you don't have much insights into what actually potential I would say prospect clients could actually search for, and therefore working diligently with sort of a negative keyword list based on their search queries. And I mean, it's also something that I very much like to flag up front to client that okay, we're starting off by doing this with the intention of getting this result of having a very refined keyword list for us to make sure that we drive maximum potential of your business.
Yeah, because
And
in regards to what you're saying, Alex, right? The biggest challenge comes from really finding the benefit of using broad match versus phrase match, because phrase match is now a broad match modifier, technically, right? Which
or I mean, I would even want to call it almost exact. It's the new exact match.
exactly, yeah. So I do feel though that I was working on a campaign targeting somebody that wanted to focus on marketing for the beauty industry, and they wanted to test broad match, and all of a sudden all they were getting were people looking for makeup artist agencies, right? So the system is not as smart, but it seems that even with conversion data you might incur into these kind of risks. So I guess what you're saying is that the more specialized a business is, the more likely it is for broad match to work, right?
And I mean, I think again, I think we would need to flag and be aware of that this would start to happen. That it you will start by getting poor sort of leads coming in the door that isn't converting. Um, but with a long-term view. So I think, I mean, anything, one should always try to look yourself in the mirror and sort of say that whatever you do is not for the next sort of 30 days, but it's actually for the next, say, 6 to 12 months, even though it is paid. And how you build sort of that structure and architecture will benefit you in the long term.
Yeah, do you though, like, I mean, this is a good point you make, but Google can make those predictions, right? Because whether they take 6 months, a month, or 12 months, advertisers are gonna stick to Google, right? But as agencies, we cannot afford to wait 6 months to get results for a client, right? So
No,
it does create a fine line for us, right?
but I mean, honestly speaking, it feels like you will sort of reach a critical mass in terms of sort of weeding out the bad queries relatively quick. Um, I've inherited accounts where the negative search query lists haven't actually been worked on, and
Yeah,
or have been worked on very poorly, and therefore, the results have therefore also been proven. Um, but I think, I mean, when I've done I, when I've done similar type of tests, I guess I'm not a fan of the experiment tool because I have my reasons. But we can get to that just now. But I like to do almost incremental tests. I know that we would then almost have different type of, and it's relatively skewed. But incremental is that you do, it's this or that, and I run things for a certain period of time, only broad match, and then I do similar, identical period of time phrase match to be able to then actually see sort of the real results. Um, and I've what has surprised me is that the actual CPC rates are lower on broad. Um, and once you sort of been able to sort of weed out some of those queries that aren't relevant, you actually starting to reach relatively good conversion rates as well. So therefore, at least for I for the countries and the customers that I worked on, because it also differs. I think to add, different markets
yeah,
differ as well. Um, Broad has actually been very beneficial because it also opens up this additional avenue. And I used to be against sort of broad and like to be more on the I would say conservative side in terms of phrase because it was more controllable. Um, but I think the more various search query terms that people are using without sort of me knowing about it, I'm actually starting to pick up that it's relevant terms to the term that I might have specified in the broad as well. That
yeah.
I'm being introduced to terminologies that I wouldn't have found out any other way, and has very little competition as well.
Yeah, like the argument that I usually hear, right, when I speak to colleagues is that they usually ask us, okay, this is true. Broad match helps you find more keywords. But at the same time, since phrase match was downgraded because they removed the broad match modifier and they incorporated it in phrase match, you get a lot of those terms too. But on the other hand side, I see your point where you're like, I don't like using experiments because they do not give me the real overview of the potential of the campaign. And actually, one of the points that, in the notes I sent you or what I wanted to discuss with you was one thing that was interesting for me. When I run a campaign on Google, when you run a campaign on Google, you spend $100 a day, for example. The moment you spend $100 a day, a couple of days pass, you get a little notification that gives you a prediction of what would happen if you were to increase the budget, right? Which is usually somewhat accurate. However, when you do an experiment, there is no prediction tool. Let's say you're running an experiment with 30% allocated to broad, you're running it for a month, the same data that Google does have, because they use it for campaigns, does not appear in the experiment view, where you can say what would happen according to Google if I were to put the budget 20 times as higher, or 10 times as higher, or 3 times higher. So I think probably that's the big, like, stoppage for you in terms of not using it. And by the way, Alex, just wanted to tell Kadir, we're going to get to your question right after this topic with Alex.
I mean, I think when it boils down to what how you described as well, there's but by changing budget from say or audience match of say 30% to say 60 or even 100, and therefore you've already changed two parameters of your experiment, correct?
Yeah.
You've changed budget and you've changed the type of the audience. What happens? You already now running a whole new experiment.
No, of course, I agree. Right? But I feel like, it would be at least nice if you're running one experiment that they could tell you, okay, with the data you collected with this experiment, if let's say the broad match is showing better results, right? It would be nice to see how much would my CPA change if I increase the budget, and they can predict that. You don't need to run an experiment. They just don't have it built in Google yet, right?
Correct. And I mean, but that's also statistically I mean, yes, you have some prediction tools to that. And I mean, there are statistical models to sort of already sort of directly indicate this. And I guess I'm very much a fan of running experiments to use black and white numbers to say that it's either this way or it's
Yeah.
that way. Or else it's gut feel, and gut feel only takes you that far. uh,
And
but
Alex, there is actually a question for you
yeah,
here from Kadir Akram. He is asking you, how often should we do a search term audit if you use broad match keywords?
if you look at the actual search terms that are coming in, again, depending on the budget that you have, again, if you spend $10 a day, probably not that often. If you spend $1,000 a day, I would sort of be on top of it, especially in the beginning, because it'll most likely be a lot of irrelevant keywords that sort of sneak in, and I mean, I would even um, there are easy sort of broad match negatives that you should be able to sort of add already upfront. There are general ones that may include free and other type of tools, other type of words. You can use even ChatGPT of asking about these type of negative keywords, and you will get a list, and then you can then also prompt and ask more specifically about your industry, and you'll get more industry specific negatives. um, and that would very much help you. So I'd say that, and when it boils down to creating your negative keywords, it will be heavy lifting in the beginning. I'd say the first, say, 14 to 30 days. But then, um, if you don't do any huge incremental changes to your particular campaign, um, you should be able to be relatively home safe, because then you've sort of safeguarded yourself.
Yeah, something I do personally, Alex, that works a lot for me is when I do the keyword research, Google comes up with plenty of search terms. And when you group them into view, you can come up with a really good negative keyword list when you actually do the keyword research, right? This is going to save some time. And another thing that usually might make sense to do, particularly if you have a broad match campaign, is the 80-20 rule at the end of the day. 20% of your terms are going to cause 80% of your spend. So always make sure to focus on the one with the more traffic at first, because they're going to have the bigger impact when optimizing them. So I think, like, to answer Kadir's question, your comment about the budget is perfect, because, it depends a lot on the budget. But of course, it needs to be watched very closely. Maybe like he can come up with a set of filters as well, to to simplify the work. I believe there is, I think it's the Insights tab in Google. There is a little Insight tab where they put a list of words, not search terms, but actual words that appear a lot in your search terms, almost like a pivot table. So that's
Yeah.
also quite helpful to look at to be able to identify some of those terms at the beginning.
But I mean, because I mean, again, like I've realized that often the CPC rates are actually cheaper on broad match than on phrase. Um, but I think there might be ways for you to, maybe if you want to not be too crazy, that you can start off by running broad, then realizing when you reach the 80/20 that you can start lifting over some of these terminologies to something that might be more phrase or exact, and then run them slightly different, and then add them to as negatives on more of a broad match campaign. It's more to sort of really take full charge and feel that you're in control of your campaigns.
No, that is true. And I mean, like, you mentioned also earlier something about the broad match that, it's a long-term game. It's like it's like investing now to get the benefits later. The CPC you talk about, I've experienced that it sticks at a lower level when you start with broad match and usually stays there compared to maybe a higher CPC. But another question here, which is I think the $1 million question, which is how to improve quality score of keywords. What about redundant keywords? Is it good to remove such keywords? I would like to start here by giving a quick nugget of experience that I've learned, and then Alex, feel free to jump in. So everybody knows, the quality score is the big formula that nobody knows about, but there is something that I've noticed is the simplest explanation to getting a good quality score. Every client that does a very strong SEO optimization of their website, remember, SEO is literally keyword driven optimization. Every day that happens, the SEO, the quality score of the keyword in Google happens to be higher because there is an optimization done for that keyword. Then from there, optimizing the ad copy, optimizing the landing page, making sure the in-page experience is good, brings it even higher. But what do you think, Alex, about this question? Like also about the redundant keywords?
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, if you start by giving the user a good user experience, which is also one of the variables to be included into how how you do well on SEO, which includes loading time, but also sort of the structure of the landing page and how the keywords have been structured, to sort of what to expect. I mean, I depending on what you mean by redundant keywords, quote unquote. If you don't get any clicks on it, there's no search queries on it. It might be redundant, but it's not really syncing your campaign per se. And I haven't seen any negatives in terms of keeping it when it comes to quality score. But
Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, let's say you have a keyword, the same keyword across two campaigns. It's a very easy solution. Create a filter for the keyword, select a time frame, compare performance, right? And then keep the one that is performing the best for you. That's usually like the best approach to that, because Google is gonna suggest you to remove redundant keyword in the auto apply, right? But
yeah,
sometimes you might want to look at the data first, so you can remove the one that you really want to remove.
yeah, no, because I think you're pointing at something that is very good. Don't buy the pig. Don't buy the pig in the bag. I mean, make sure that things are working. And sometimes Google, or often Google's suggestions aren't the best. And I think it's very important that you double check and make sure that it's suitable for you. And I think like the example you just gave is fantastic.
Yeah, no, and what's funny about Google's recommendation is that during the onboarding of my clients, there is always one thing that I tell them is that the account score, it doesn't mean anything, and it's not a reflection of how much I'm optimizing the account, the optimization score, sorry. And I make it clear, like I dedicate 5 minutes showing that to them. 50%, 60% of them, every now and then I get an email. Oh, the optimization score fell to 60% today. What do we need to do to pay less? And I'm like, you dismiss those recommendations. They come back the next day, and it's like a continuous war. And sometimes I wish there was a way to say, no, I know that you want me to increase the budget, but my client can't. Like, or I know that these are conflicting negative keywords, but they're there for a reason. But I was just actually focusing on the negative keywords the other day for a broad match campaign, and I kind of thought of an idea that kind of popped up to my mind when it comes to broad match campaigns. And I wanted to ask for your opinion, Alex. So I was like, how can I come up with keywords that are not necessarily on my radar? So I went on Google and I start typing searches as if I was a customer of this on my own client, and the search box suggestion gave me plenty of negatives, and I'm like, you know what, this might be exactly the negatives that are going to pop up first when my clients are going to search. And that method is proven to be one of the best ways for me to find negative keywords. Like, have you seen the same trend with your clients?
I mean, yes, but sort of no. I guess I often take like paid from a SEO aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, where I build, because SEO is a long play, and it often takes, by starting, it's almost like where you start building things based on where you want to rank high on those type of keywords, and you there are plenty now really strong tools in terms of keywords, in terms of SEO, and also those type of insights when it boils down both to parent sort of keywords and sort of more specific ones,
Yeah.
and also what not to be part of, and they may not be directly part of Google's tool sets. It's other tools that are being used more specifically for SEO, but I'm using a lot of these, and because we also work with a lot of SEO stuff. So, but that's an even longer play. But once we start ranking higher on the right type of keywords that we're now bidding on, I'm slowly but surely switching them off when it boils down to paid,
Yeah.
or to actually not double pay. So I'm making sure that they work in synergy,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of insights. Because you mentioned something before when it came to quality score that is
Yeah.
key. You there's a lot to take from SEO to apply to paid and vice versa.
Oh, absolutely. And many people don't see that. That's why I'm like, guys, the two things go hand in hand, like, but it's pretty clear to me, and apparently it's clear to you. And we got another question for you, Alex, here. In the context of improving the quality score, two factors, ad relevance and landing page experience, can be improved. But as far as expected CTR is concerned, what is your experience to improve this?
I mean, number one uh, is of course the keyword that you're bidding on,
Yeah.
the ad copy, and then potentially also what audience you're exposing this to. And because ultimately, I think if you're not reaching a CTR that is 3+ or so, um, you're probably not communicating or conveying the thing that your users actually want, or potential users actually want to click on. So there's something up there. And so I would experiment with firstly the ad copy, the audience, and and then sort of further down the line see what else that might could be wrong. But again, I think that you need to sort of start creating a checklist, not trying to change everything all at once, because you won't know what actually is the cause and effect of that. You need to take the time and do tests. Let's change this variable. Is it improved over the next 1 week to 10 days? Yes, cool. Then I knew it was partly that. Let me see if I can test by doing this. Can I improve it even more? Um,
Yeah, and I think a lot of the expected CDR goes hand in hand also with the actual what's the name? The actual like ad relevance, because usually the expected CDR goes up for a keyword the moment you are going to use it on the keyword in the ad copy as well. Because expected CDR at the end of the day is it's like also calculates based on the position that you're gonna show up, right? So it's not actually linked to your actual CDR. But that is true, and like one of the problems with expected CDR is that you really need a very good breakdown of your ad groups in terms of keywords, because otherwise it's got ad relevance and expected CDRs are very hard to achieve, because if you mix up keywords that don't have anything to do with each other, that's gonna be like one of the toughest challenges. And usually ad relevance and expected CDR, they usually either have the same scoring, above average, good, or they're both a bad result as a result of that. But apparently today we have a lot of questions, which I love. So guys, please feel free to keep them coming. So Praveen is asking, what about close variance keywords? What about adding similar keywords such as, for example, Renault vans, close variant, Renault van, exact match? Also, what would be the best thing to do when you notice some good keywords starting getting higher CPC? So I guess Alex, let's answer this question in two parts: cross variants and IRCPC. As far as cross variants go, I believe like the best practice is to make sure that as long as they don't have a low search volume, which is actually just clustering your campaign for nothing, you can add and test out the close variant, which already shows up in AdWords anyway. But there shouldn't be any problem with adding them or not adding them technically.
but I mean, I think also, I mean, I guess what I meant earlier when it came to, exact is the new phrase, is that exact is no longer an exact term either. You will appear on things, and if you start reading the fine print as well in terms of how exact nowadays appears, it appears on searches for people that have a likeliness of wanting that on that query. So I think even in this particular way, if you have Renault van as an exact match, and you have people that do Renault vans as well, your exact match will appear there, even
Yeah.
though you don't want it to be there, maybe at cases. But Google prompts you that way anyway now.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, you can add, not add, no difference, basically. So you can keep those going. And what about this question of what would be the best thing to do when you notice some good keyword study getting higher CPC? I would open a parenthesis so you can articulate your answer, Alex. Uh, it would be good to know why of the CPC, because competition can go up and down in the market, and there is nothing you can do there.
I mean, exactly. I was about to say that exactly. I mean, you might have been one of the early adapters into a particular niche, and all of a sudden you have a couple of them there. So I mean, higher CPCs is normally higher competition, and unfortunately, when it comes to paid, and the beautiful business model of Google and real time bids, is that this will happen naturally. And so I think over time, you will, as you start expanding, pay more uh, for the same amount of traffic.
Yeah.
uh, so, I mean, again, if you have a good ROAS or whatever KPI you might run it at, awesome. But I think one shouldn't put pay everything into a paid bucket and believe that you can sort of run a long-term sustainable business, because I think you will hit some sort of uh, ceiling in terms of what you are willing to spend to gain a new client via paid.
Actually, Alex, a funny story happened like in the last 3 weeks, one of my largest clients was noticing a decrease in conversion rate and an increase in cost per click. And we were like, what's going on here? And turns out all of a sudden, two competitors entered the market. We are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, and we have a 12% market share. This other company was spending 35, was having a 35% market share. We were like, how much money does this company have? And more importantly, how the hell did they do that? Because you need to get there profitably. Turns out we investigated this company. They were offering the same service as my client, but they were based in Malaysia and they were not offering the service. They were scamming people. And the moment they were gone, our conversion rate went up, our CPC went down, So clearly, like a lot of those CPC swings are also caused by what's going on in your market. And it could be maybe during holidays, there is more people advertising. It happens all the time, right? And they actually, Praveen has a follow-up questions here about ad. I think I'm gonna read the question for everybody, and then I'm gonna I'm gonna say what I think he means with that. What about using different ad hooks while writing the ad copies? There might be cases where you're too concerned with a strong ad hook and completely ignore or not even put relevant keywords in the headline. How do you improve the quality score? I think what he refers with ad hook is catchy phrases, or like more of a marketing text to attract people to pay attention to your ad. What's your thought, Alex?
I mean, I think I think maybe starting from where it all started, keyword quality. I think that's not, I think the major concern here. I think it's at least in my book. I think one needs to stand out in this space. Then how you go about it, you shouldn't come up with things that aren't true. You should probably be personal to your particular audience and address them with sort of your direct value prop or a potential problem that they may have, and you'd have the solution to. I think you're not after driving a load of clicks. You're after driving individuals or businesses that want to buy from you. And if you say something in your ad that isn't reflected in what you're offering, unfortunately, you will sort of have paid in vain, and all your campaigns are wasted.
Yeah, I think, Alex, another thing to keep in mind is that responsive search ads have 15 headlines and 4 description lines. So as long as you say, okay, I'm gonna use 3 of the headlines to be more salesy, for example. I'll give you an example. Free the 24/7 customer support. That's not a keyword. It's like a quote unquote a service of the ad. It's what I call usually an headline number 3. So you do need those in the ads as well, right? Because otherwise you're just gonna put keywords and it makes no sense, the messaging. So you can put those. You just need to balance the amount of non-keyword related headlines and description lines to actual messaging that you need to communicate that differentiates you from the competition as well.
But I think, in the end of the day, one thing I think is important, and I think unfortunately many businesses out there are forgotten. Who are you trying to sell to? Know thy customer, and by knowing something about your client or customer base, exactly what you're saying there, Rocco, you should be able to find that sort of mix, because I think with that mix, you will be able to do a home safe in terms of having really good positive ROIs on your ad campaigns.
That's great. I totally agree with that, Alex. And I want to remind everybody that as we are heading toward the end of today's episode, if you have any more questions, now is the time to write them down. because Alex doesn't come in cheap, so we can make sure to get the answer for free now. Alex, before we head toward conclusion, I wanted to check with you if there was anything that you feel the user base should do if they're planning to do broad match campaigns and they've never done it and they are scared in case the clients get upset. If you were to give them a quick piece of advice, how would they suggest them to go about that?
Step one, I would be also upfront with client and say that we're doing this at upfront as an experiment. The intention of us doing this is because X, Y, Z, for us to be able to grow your customer base, at hopefully a lower cost per,
Yeah.
or with a better ROAS or whatever metric that you may sort of run that. Number two, I think we've gone through a couple of the methods in terms of starting off by having a strong negative keyword list, and make sure that you incorporate that in all your campaigns. And it's also easy to forget to add it to one or two campaigns, and you only see that a couple of weeks later, and
Yeah.
it's not too late, but it can be costly. uh, and then I think lastly is really make sure that you follow up,
Yeah.
and that you might spend a bit more time with the account at, in the starting phases,
Perfect.
and then you start letting things go.
That's a very good piece of advice, Alex. And as always, I would like to thank you for joining. You have been great as always. Like you give us a lot of good information, and you saw how many questions you got today. That means like they found everything very valuable. We will follow up with each and every one of you shortly with the dates for our next episode with Alex. We try to do it once a month about topics that you guys might like. And should you want to follow Alex or write him, you can go on his website, yourdigitalassembly.com, and his LinkedIn, Alex Makura. If you want to talk to me, zebraadvertisement.com or my own LinkedIn, Rocco Baldassari. Thank you so much, guys, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.